Hey, what is up? Welcome to this episode of the Entrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast. As always, I'm your host, Brian Lofermento, and how frequently here on this show do I talk about the fact that entrepreneurship is the vehicle to not only make the business world better, but to make the world better and to do good things for society. Well, today's guest is such an incredible example of that because this is someone who has had so much prior experience in his career as an executive, as the CEO, the leader of so many cool companies that have been successful, to someone who now pulled himself out of retirement to serve as the CEO of a business that is truly making the world a safer place, utilizing technology. It's going to be so cool. Unfortunately, he's solving a problem that we wish didn't exist, but fortunately, he's recognized the opportunity to make the world better in this way. So let me tell you all about today's guest. His name is Paul Mauritz. Paul brings extensive executive leadership experience to SignalQ. SignalQ is a software-only signal intelligence platform that provides a low-cost, simple-to-incorporate, military-grade event detection capability that can leverage freely associated mobile phones as sensors. Think crowdsourcing for gunshot detection. That's the solution that Paul is really spearheading and bringing to the world. Over the past decade, he served as the CEO of NetCraftsmen LLC, where he significantly grew the business, ultimately leading to its successful acquisition by a private equity-backed firm. Paul's strength is not only in creation, but in execution. We're all going to learn a lot from him today. We're not only going to learn about the cool technology that he's bringing to the world, but also the way that he sees the world, the way that he views growth, and most importantly, the way that he views impact. So I'm not going to say anything else. Let's dive straight into my interview with Paul Mauritz. All right, Paul, I'm so excited to have you here with us today. First things first, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Brian. I'm happy to be here.
Heck yes. So I tooted your horn quite a bit, and we're going to learn a lot from you here today. But first things first, you've got to take us beyond the bio. Who's Paul? How'd you start doing all these cool things?
I started young. I was one of three brothers to a single mother, and so we had to help our mom out. I sold my first company when I was 12. It was a lawn service business that I built around the neighborhood that we lived in, usually borrowing the customer's lawn equipment because in the beginning I couldn't afford my own. Built up enough contracts that someone eventually bought that business. Got my first full-time job when I was 14 as a freshman in high school, learning how to repair cars, auto body shop. Along the way, what I learned early was that it wasn't really about the original idea. It was about being a really good executor of an idea. Then I joined the Army. The Army taught me discipline, taught me focus, taught me to plan and then execute that plan and adjust if the plan isn't right. And then spent a long time in and around the intelligence community, working at small and large companies. I got my MBA in 2012, late in life, and that gave me a foundation of education to go with my experience that really said to me that I am not an idea guy. I'm not the guy that's going to sit around and think up the next most brilliant thing that there is, but I'm the guy that knows how to take something that's a good idea and get it to market, to the people that really need it or could use it or that want it or whatever the reasons are that they're going to buy it. So I'm an execution person, and I learned that about myself a long, long time ago, and it's true now. At NetCraftsmen, the company had been around for almost 20 years. When I took over as CEO, it was small, but they knew there was something there, and I agreed with them. It was a consulting business with just great engineers. And we built it and sold it, and that was it for me. I was going to be done. And I was playing golf and fishing and doing all the things I'd always said I wanted to do. But learned that there's only so much golf you can play, and a compelling idea found me. And this compelling idea is around the gunshot detection technology that you alluded to. And so my story is long, but the thread is that I ran sales, I ran marketing, I ran operations, I ran an engineering group. I kind of had every job in a business. And so when it was time for me to be a CEO, what I understood best was go find the right people, the smart people, and that my job became keeping pardon the word, the crap out of their way, letting them be successful.
Yeah, Paul, I love that overview, and very publicly, thank you for your service as well. I think it's incredible hearing this overview because I relate. I started my first business when I was 19. You started even younger than that. And what I chalk so much of that experience up to is, Paul, when we were kids, and I'm lumping my 19-year-old self in as a kid, we didn't know any better other than just to do. And you and I in particular, we didn't have all the resources that people have today. We couldn't just Google things and learn about things that way. We had to learn by doing. Talk to us about that entrepreneurial DNA starting so young, because a lot of people think about how few resources we had, but it sounds like for both you and I, that became our superpower, is learning by doing.
Superpower is a relative term, but what I learned from my parents who were not together, both of them, was that hard work matters. And when you combine hard work with a goal, a vision, if you will, something you can see, something you really want to achieve. When I was 12, when I was 10, when I started my lawn service, it was really all about, I just needed money, wanted money. There were things I wanted to have that my mom couldn't afford to get us, and she needed help too. And so what I decided was that doing something to produce an income, to make a difference over the years, was what really drove me. And yeah, it started young, but it really started almost out of necessity. Right? If I wanted to be successful at the thing, if I wanted to acquire the things that I wanted to acquire, which as a kid, that was success, I needed to do it not on my own, but I needed to do it by doing it, and not by thinking about it, not by processing it, not by joining up with somebody else, but by just grabbing the bull by the horns and doing it. And my career has pocketed with startups that most didn't work, but some did, and joining organizations that really needed a push, a drive, someone to push them forward. And that's just where I've settled in.
Yeah, Paul, I really want to hone in on something that you said in there, which you said you just had to do something. And I want to call that out because I think this is something that listeners can really take away a lot of value from, is that doing something, you didn't say doing the right thing. You didn't say doing a specific thing. You said doing something. And it just seems to me, even going back to the overview that you gave us about your journey from here, whether we're talking military service, professional career, CEO of an IT company, all of these things, it's one thing led to another. And obviously, it sounds like it makes sense in the rearview mirror, but the fact is you've just always been doing something, and importantly, picking something up from all of those things. Talk to us about how you gained things and accumulated it along the way on a nonlinear path.
It's interesting. When people ask me, what's your key to success, what I tell them is I don't know what to do. Generally speaking, I don't know the right answer, but I know the wrong answer because I've probably done it. I've probably made that mistake in my 40 plus years of drive in business. And so the opportunity to make that mistake, to learn from that mistake, and to move on, sort of goes back to that do something. And that really, my first real job was I joined the military. I joined the Army at 17. And I was in a fairly dangerous profession where you needed to learn to listen to people who knew what they were doing, do the things that they said to do that were right, ignore the things that they said to do that were wrong. And when you got new data, change your plan. You're going to, in life, in the military, no matter what you're doing, you're going to set down on a path. You have to constantly take in inputs. You have to constantly learn. You have to constantly process and change your plan accordingly along the way. And if there is a superpower in me, and doing something is the result of that, it's being adaptable. It's being decisive and then adaptable.
Yeah, I love that. I'm going to use that as a segue because obviously when we talk about military and the dangers that come with it, there is an unfortunate problem in society that we do face, which is, even on your website, you guys call out as an example at events, at concerts, we're always under threats that we know of, but also you've worked in known intelligence agencies and officials, and there's threats that we're not even aware of. Talk to us about SignalQ, because there's Paul just hanging out on the golf course and something got you excited enough to say, wait, no, let's use the power of business and the power of executive leadership to make the world a better and safer place.
I will, and have to back up just a little bit. There's a company that's been around for about 20 years. It's Loughborough and Company. They're in the software development, kind of high-end software development, mostly in the intelligence community, building radio frequency and signal intelligence solutions for the intelligence community, which is a fairly rare kind of a skill to be able to understand radio frequency, the sounds, the unique sounds, and signal intelligence, which might be sounds, might be sight, might be all kinds of things, and develop solutions for them. And so they, about 7 years ago, the founder of that company was listening to the news, listening to another school shooting, and said to himself, I think I can help here. I think the technology that we're building, the approach that we're taking with signal intelligence and platforms that automatically do things could be of value. And so he started essentially tinkering. About 5 years ago, he met a gentleman, a brilliant scientist, who has his PhD in linguistics and has been solving really complex radio frequency and signal intelligence problems for a long time. They got together and invented a way to detect unique acoustic signatures. And I say that on purpose. Gunshots are just one example of a unique acoustic signature. Drones, explosions, screams, all kinds of sounds have a unique acoustic signature. And together they invented and patented what is now the core of SignalQ. And that technology is looking for very specific signatures in the sound stream. And Andy, the founder, said, about 5 years ago, started pouring money into the company to build a prototype. About 3 years ago, this is all before I joined. I joined in May of this year. They went to the Army and said, we think we've got something. The Congress was literally hosting these things called congressional rodeos, looking for solutions for gunshots. And all the big companies that you could think of, I won't name them, all came together. And this tiny little piece of a company called SignalQ was also invited and won the rodeo, beat out all the other competitors with a software-only solution that's extraordinarily effective, and because it's software-only, can be very inexpensive. And that's the process of winning the rodeos and demonstrating to the Army the efficacy of the solution led them to spin out the business. And that's about the time that I joined in May. We continue to work with the Army to continue to evolve the use of the technology. But the Army's proven that we are extraordinarily effective at detecting gunshots. Our false positive rate is very low. It all happens on an edge device. If I were holding it, it would be my Android cell phone. It can be any device that has a microphone. We focus on cell phones because everyone carries them. And the vision for SignalQ, my job, is to get to the point where SignalQ is on every phone, everywhere, all over the world. And that's billions of phones. But to get to the point where everyone has a gunshot detection. And as you said, we can't stop gunshot from happening. We can't stop mass shootings. But what we can do is give the people that have to respond to those shootings lots of information about the fact that, yes, there was a gunshot. This is the caliber of the bullet that was fired. So it's a long gun or a short gun. And more importantly, if three or more sensors find it, again, our sensors, our cell phones, we'll tell them exactly where it is. Whether it's indoors or outdoors, we'll geolocate down to the spot that says there is one shooter or 10. They're in this location. They're moving. Because the phone is such a useful sensor device, it has lots of other sensors in it. So your phone knows if you get in your car, for example. It knows when you get out of your car. It knows if you're running. It knows if you're walking. Accelerometers and other technologies, we use all that. So if there is a gunshot, and someone takes fire, for example, we can tell, did they fall? Did they take off running? Did they get into their police car or whatever vehicle they're talking to? And so it's the combination of the power of that sensor, turns out to be the cell phone that billions of people have, and our low-cost software solution gives us the opportunity to achieve that vision, which is that we can't stop gunshots from happening, but man, can we identify when they happen and exactly where they happen.
Yeah, Paul, hearing you talk about this, I mean, it is powerful because that software-only approach, software can change the world. We've seen it in so many different ways across so many different applications. But what I'm really hearing from you is, I mean, it's a win-win all around. Like, we're all interested in this type of solution. And so I want to ask you about stakeholders, because anytime I get to talk to an executive like you, where the network effect is in full play from a business standpoint, where the more people that use it, the better it is for all of us. And so with that in mind, we're talking about end users, citizens we'll call them, I guess. We're talking about the government obviously wants a solution like this. We're talking about law enforcement. We're talking about event managers. There's so many people whose best interests are having the network effect at full play here. What's the path, Paul? It's a big question as the CEO of this company, but how do you navigate that landscape of all these different stakeholders? Where do you focus in on strategically to get that penetration? I'd love to hear the way you work that out.
It was really interesting and very complicated because we could go anywhere. As you pointed out, Brian, everybody feels like they have this problem. We wanted to get to schools because that was kind of what spurred Andy's first vision. But it can be challenging to get to schools because of contract vehicles, and they're distributed and they all work different ways. And so we ended up taking a really broad approach to the market and touching kind of every industry. And the one that popped up to the top is law enforcement. They, much like the Army, they expect to be shot at. They expect to fire a weapon. And so they know that this problem is something that is real and in their face every day. And so we started with public safety. We're doing work with a variety of counties and in a couple of cases, federal organizations. We're in the proof of concept phase with several now. Those proofs of concept are all going very, very well, so we expect them to turn into revenue in the near term. But the second reason to pick public safety is schools just one step beyond that. If you're talking to a county, for example, the school system resides in that county. And so counties become important to us. And that is all predicated on the cell phone as the sensor. The next market that we'll go to after public safety is venues, concert venues, stadiums, because every one of them that we've discovered has cameras. They already have cameras. They're already watching what's going on, looking for issues that they have to worry about. 90-something% of those cameras all have microphones in them. It doesn't have to be a cell phone. It just has to be something that has an audio capability. So we can deploy on the camera system that already exists and turn that entire stadium into a gunshot detection device. And then when individuals walk in to that stadium with their cell phone, with the SignalQ software on it, it just joins that mesh and extends that sensor network even more.
Yeah, it's very cool solution, honestly. And even these real life use cases that you're showing us just further exemplify the fact of the more we use it, the more it's embedded into society. It just sits in the background is really what I think is the beauty of this solution, is that we don't necessarily think about it in the moment. You talk about it just being on those devices, and then the rest takes care of itself because of the software. So hearing that is very cool. I want to ask you about the conversations you have, because we all have conversations in our businesses, and I'm going to call it sales, but I don't think any of us really like to view these conversations as sales. But obviously in any sort of sales environment, we're looking to disarm people. We're looking to show that we're of service to them. We're looking to talk about the solutions that we bring to the table. But Paul, in your case, you're doing it on a topic that is very difficult to talk about in public and very difficult to confront. So talk to me about what those conversations are like. We all like to ignore these things until, unfortunately, we see them in the news. But what do those preemptive conversations look like when you're talking to the stakeholders?
I'll answer that question, but I'll give you it's even more complicated than that, because if someone says, all right, I buy that you can do this, show me, we have to go to a gun range. It's not like we can bring up a demonstrate. I mean, we can show them videos, we can show them pictures, but to truly demonstrate the power of the solution, we have to go to a shooting range. So you even have that complication. And so when I first started, my first slide was just a bullet list of all the horrific events that have happened over I only use the last 5 years. And because you only have to go back 5 years to just see many horrific events. But after my third sales call, I took that slide out, because people don't need to be told that this is a problem. What they need to be told is there's a very effective, low-cost solution that, because it's software only, because we're using a cell phone as our sensor, that virtually everyone, including students in a school or every police officer or every civilian that goes to a concert venue, that they already have them. My first slide now starts off with that demonstrating the effectiveness, the efficacy, and the price, right? We really focus on those things. We're much more effective than the hardware solutions out there because we're listening everywhere. We're crowdsourced. We're not listening only in the direction we're pointed to. So that's the efficacy part of it. We're low cost because we're a software only solution. Technically, we could charge whatever we wanted. And we've set our pricing model to be so low that in a school system, a county school system with more than 100 schools that we're talking to, the annual cost of a license for SignalQ is less than what they spend on the year-end pizza party. So we're trying to drive that it's extraordinarily effective. We're very, very affordable, and we can be everywhere, the crowdsourcing. And so that's my first slide, and I usually don't get off that slide. The next kind of things people want to talk about is, okay, so how does it work? But and we get into that, but my slide is really about, it's effective, it's affordable, and it can be everywhere.
Yeah, I love that, because from a business perspective, that's really what we all aim for. And again, I'll wrap it into under the disguise of a sales conversation, but it's not sales. It really is service. And so I want to use that as a segue point, Paul, to talk to you, the CEO, not you necessarily the SignalQ CEO, just as an executive and as a businessman, because what I really love is it's very clear from today's conversation that there's a lot of brilliant minds behind the scenes at SignalQ, making all of this stuff possible, which these are very complex solutions. But what I love is that they've recognized, and you all have recognized, the power of business to be the vehicle to get this into the hands of so many other people. And of course, that's one of your value adds as a successful CEO is that recognition of, hey, the more that we grow, the more we can change the world. Talk to me about that business emphasis, because there's so many ways that people want to pretend, business is exclusively about profit. But we as entrepreneurs, you're preaching to the choir that we know it's about impact. So talk to us about that being the vehicle through which you get SignalQ out there.
It's a good topic, and I'm a business person, and the people the folks that started the parent company are business people, and everybody wants to make money. But I'm at a point in my career, and they're at a point in their career. They're running a very successful business that SignalQ was spun out of. So to some degree, it isn't about the money anymore. Of course, I'd like to have more money. I think all of us would, but the business part is really tied to how can I do well, by doing good. And it's serendipity. The reason I'm the CEO of this company, it's the network that I've built over my 40 years, overlapped in a place with their network. And so when it came time for them to say, we really need somebody to run this business, numerous people said to them, you should go talk to Paul. He's a guy that can help you do this, and he'll do it for the right reasons, because he's made his mark. What I don't have in my legacy as a business is, until NetCraftsmen, I couldn't look backwards and say, I helped build that. True story, when I was dating my girlfriend, now some 20 plus years ago, back in the days when I got out of the Army and went to work for the government, there was a period of time where about 6 months where my clearance had to transfer, and you could sit around on your thumbs and not do anything, or you could just wait until your clearance transferred. I chose to wait and built multi-million-dollar houses for a cousin of mine, and I was the laborer. I was just carrying wood and tools, and I didn't do anything exciting. But I still, when I was dating my girlfriend in the wooing phase, I drove her back through that neighborhood and pointed out some of the houses that I helped build with pride. I helped build them. And so until NetCraftsmen came along, I didn't have that on my career, on my resume. I didn't have a business that was a legacy that when I left it would keep going, that I had built. And so now SignalQ affords me that opportunity. We're starting from scratch. We're a startup. I'm out raising money. I'm doing all the things that the business needs to do, but wrapped around it, I think to your point, Brian, it's a business that we've built in a way, and with a cost structure that we've built very, very low, to allow us to drive a price point in the market that will drive adoption, will drive acceptance, will drive that vision of having SignalQ embedded on every phone, everywhere, all the time.
Yeah, Paul, I love those real life insights. I'm so appreciative of how transparently you share all of that with our listeners here today. And I want to ask you this question, because the more mature I've gotten as an entrepreneur and as a person, I'm 16 years into my entrepreneurial journey. I've consistently found that the better the questions are that you're asking yourself, the better the answers are that you'll find. You ask small questions, you'll find small answers. You ask big questions, you'll find big answers. What are some of those questions that you're asking yourself as an executive when it comes to SignalQ? Because hearing the fact that you're fundraising, hearing the fact that you're talking to all the different stakeholders, you're navigating a lot of waters simultaneously, Paul. When you sit down for your executive time, and maybe you're surrounded by the other brilliant minds behind the scenes, but what do those questions look like that you ask internally?
In the beginning, they were around the technology. My first day, we went to the range because I wanted to see for myself that the technology worked. But nowadays, it's really about spending a lot of time talking to the market, asking questions about how they'll use it, how they want to use it, what features do they want, because there's lots of capability that is still nascent that we haven't built out yet. But the majority of my time is spent with the engineering team, the folks that are building the technology, because we could get pulled in lots of different directions. We could get distracted by this client or that client who wants us to do things in a different way than what we believe the mass market wants to do. So most of our questions are not around if we should do something, but when we should do something. When should that feature or that capability be built into our roadmap? Everything that a client asks for that drives them to want to buy is important, but our questions and our discussions are really around the when. And we're trying right now to stay very focused on gunshot detection. Even though our logo says event detection, everything about us is in the broader sense about event detection, because there are other dangerous events besides gunshots. But gunshot has the attention of the market today. Gunshot has the attention of the targeted audiences that we're going after. And so we have to stay very true to that. And so to answer your question, what I'm asking of the engineers is, that's an interesting idea. That's a good idea. But where does that put us on a roadmap? How does that get us closer to revenue? Because revenue is really what it's all about. And while I'm raising money, as we drive revenue up, if I can keep revenue growing at the pace it's growing, I can raise less money, which means our valuation doesn't get impacted as much. And so there's lots of pieces around it. Most of the questions are about how do I adapt this technology to the business market that we face and get to the customers as quickly as possible.
Yeah, Paul, thinking and talking like a CEO here in real time in front of us today. I'm so appreciative of that. I'm going to piggyback off of Nike's slogan here because it fits right in with your unique value add in anything you've done up to this point, which is, of course, just do it. You talked about the power of execution early on in our conversation today. What's the difference, Paul? I've been in the entrepreneurial game for a long time. You've been in it even longer than me. What's the difference? Why is it so hard for most people to execute?
To execute. I think what held me back for a number of years was fear. Fear of failure, I think, to some degree. But more importantly, fear of letting somebody down. I think one of the things that I have built up over the years are relationships with people, that clients, I got very lucky and got to go to the Masters this year, not because I got tickets, but because a former client of mine's wife became the head of security at Augusta National. And so I stayed at his house. And so that's a long-term, forever kind of relationship. And that relationship exists because I never let that customer down. My company, my business, never let that customer down. And so I can point to customers that I've known for 30 years that I'm talking to now about SignalQ, because those relationships and the environment and the infrastructure and the ecosystem, that's the better word, that we build throughout our careers, if we do it right, if we're working on, my mantra is always delight the customer. The delighted customer is going to continue to work with you, and no matter what it is you're doing. And so I think that delighting the customer piece of it is one of the key things to help me overcome the fear. If my customers are delighted and they continue to buy, then we must be doing something right. And so it took me a while to get over that sort of fear of just jumping in. But as I started, I grew up, the way I say it is I grew up hard. And I had to learn pretty early that you're going to fail. You're going to run into trouble. Things are not going to go the way you expect them to go. But it doesn't mean you're wrong. It doesn't mean you failed. It means you just have to try something different or potentially try harder. And I luckily learned those lessons pretty early in my career.
Yeah, Paul, I want to continue going down this path because I love hearing the way that executive mind of yours thinks. And you talk about the roadmap and is this getting us closer to where we want to go? I love asking people about timelines. What is that time horizon like in your head? Are you looking at SignalQ a year from now, 3 years from now, 5 years from now? Like how obviously you have big, and everyone behind the scenes has big plans for its market penetration, but internally, what is it? What is the timeline that you're working towards?
Well, I'm of an age. I'm of retirement age. And so when I took this job, what I told them was that I would build them a business that got them back the return on investment that they wanted, but that more importantly would make a difference. And then we would do it in 3 years. And so, I started in May, so May of 24. So May of 27 is kind of my horizon. Whether I actually stop then or keep going for a little bit longer, or potentially even stop earlier if we get there from now, the roadmap's all predicated on a market penetration within 3 years that drives a valuation for the business, that lets the folks that invested all their time and energy and money into it before I came along get their return on investment. And that's exactly what we did at NetCraftsmen, right? When I took over NetCraftsmen in 2014, there were 6 original owners that were trying to figure out what have I been doing for 20 years, and how do I turn this into something that will continue to do well, but do good for me too, and help make my retirement possible. And we were able to do that. And those owners all walked away with a substantial sum of money based on us building a business and driving a business. And so that's the same mindset I have at SignalQ, but it's a 3-year horizon for me. But that doesn't mean that the company has to be sold or acquired or something in 3 years. What that means is in 3 years, this has to be a business that's operating very smoothly with someone else as the CEO. And with me as chairman or on the board, or doing something different in 3 years. So I have a much shorter horizon than I'm used to, just because that's what I want to do with my life.
Yeah, I think it's very cool to hear that, because what I'm also hearing, and I think that in and of itself is a business lesson, that yes, you have the time horizon in your head, but it sounds like you're not married to it, Paul. And I think that that's such an important thing in life and business, is don't be married to it. We truly don't know. And the fact that you say maybe it ends sooner, maybe it ends later, you're going to see where that takes you. And part of that is, of course, a big shout out to your agility and your resilience along the way. So lots of good business lessons in there. Paul, you've been a wealth of knowledge. I don't know how you're going to answer this last question, because it's super broad, so you can take in any direction that you want. And that is, what's your one best piece of advice? That one takeaway, knowing that we're being listened to by both entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs at all different stages of their own personal and business journeys. What's that one thing that you want to impart on them today?
Wow, one thing. I think I'd have to say, if you don't believe in it, don't do it. It has to be not just in your head, but the idea, the approach, the business, the whatever, has to be in your heart too. And that's the beauty of SignalQ. That it appeals to me both from the potential to benefit me financially, but more importantly, to benefit everyone around me, and in a really tangible, positive way. And that's what pulled me out of retirement. So you have to believe in it. You have to be willing to sacrifice things. People tend to not sacrifice things if they don't believe in what they're doing. And so I've seen peers, I've done it in at least 2 cases, where I took on a job, a role, for something that I didn't believe in, because I either needed the money, or I wanted to do something different, or not because I believed that it was the right thing both for me and for the market, and for in this case, we're hoping that we're the right thing for civilization to some degree, although that, it sounds grandiose. We have a grandiose vision. So you have to believe it. You have to believe it in your head, and you have to believe it in your heart. Otherwise, you just won't pour everything into it that's necessary.
Yes, very powerful advice. So listeners, this is advice for every single one of us. Paul himself takes it on board as well, because we can't just say that we believe it. We need to believe it down at the deepest levels of our being, to the point where part of our identity is the fact that we believe in what it is that we're doing. So Paul, you're doing deeply meaningful work. I'm so grateful to see your executive mind at work for such an incredible solution that the world needs. So drop those links on us. Where can listeners find out more about SignalQ, all the great work that you're doing, and follow along as you all make the world a better place?
Thank you. Our website is www.signalq.com. Q, just the letter Q. Our LinkedIn and Facebook are at SignalQ. We SignalQ everything, and so that's the best place to find us. It's the best place to learn about us. If you go to our website today, it's evolving. The more we move down this path, the more markets we look to penetrate, but more importantly, the more implementations we do that we're learning from. We're evolving our message a little bit. We're evolving our technology a little bit, and you can kind of come along for the ride. It's signalq.com.
Yes, listeners, you already know the drill. We're making it as easy as possible for you to find those links down below in the show notes, no matter where it is that you're tuning into today's episode. Super easy, signalq.com. We're also linking to Paul's personal LinkedIn if you want to reach out and continue the conversation, or if there's a solution where you say, oh my gosh, I could link Paul up with this person that I know in this municipality or this law enforcement agency, whatever comes to mind. Don't be shy about reaching out. Paul is one of us. He is a fellow entrepreneur. You've heard the way his CEO mind thinks here today. So Paul, on behalf of myself and all the listeners worldwide, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you, Brian. I appreciate it.